Good evening and welcome to Kunsanpayo Choling. We are really happy to have you here and to share with you the teaching by Jetsima Akalamo. This teaching is entitled, she said, I'm not used to this screen. Sorry, this teaching is entitled Understanding Offerings. 2 words. I can get this. And hope you enjoy it. It was given in 1989. So we'll begin.
On these special days, as Buddhists, we feel a tremendous amount of joy and try to remain mindful and have a sense of recognition of the fantastic gifts that we have been given by the Buddha over time. Because these are truly, what is the expression, the gifts that keep on giving. These are the gifts that never stop, they never run out. It isn't the case that we simply receive some teaching and the teaching has therefore become an old thing or a dead thing or a thing that is not miraculously eternal. It isn't the case at all, because we consider the Dharma to be a living thing. The blessing of the Dharma continues. It's very much alive. When we practice devotion to our teachers and practice devotion to the Buddha and all the Bodhisattvas, we think that the blessing is a living essence, that it is a lineage or a connection that is a breathing thing and brings us right back to the root of the source of that blessing, which is the very mind of enlightenment itself. Of all the things that one could experience, of all the moments in time that one could acknowledge, that moment of precious awakening is by far the most living presence. And so, the meaning then for a day like this is very much alive. And we should think with great devotion and wonder of the many feats that Lord Buddha accomplished. During these days, you'll notice that on the different altars that we have here, there are many different kinds of offerings. You'll see vegetables offered, fruits offered, rices, grains, candies, candles, lights of different kinds. Often people will offer jewels, precious minerals of one kind or another, or crystals. There are many different kinds of offerings, and you can go to any of the different, and flowers of course, and you can go to any of the different altars and see very beautiful, very artistically laid out and carefully laid out and lovingly laid out offerings. This is a time then for offering for us. Since this is a time for us to do that, and since those of you that are not familiar with this practice may wonder why there is so much food on the altar and whether we're going to have lunch afterward or something like that, I would like to give a short teaching about how offering is to be considered, how we are to understand this gift-giving, how we are to think of it when we make a gift, and how we are to think of it when we see others give a gift. In order to understand deeply this process, excuse me, I would like first to speak of by necessity, and as a means of contrast, the ordinary kinds of activities and ordinary kinds of perceptions that we engage in, so that we can look at the difference between such an ordinary thing and the process of making offerings. In our ordinary lives, when we see an object, when we view an object, whatever that object is, we have to perceive it with our five senses. Even if we are blind, we perceive it with our other senses. Even if we are deaf, we perceive with what we have left. Even if we are blind and deaf, we perceive with touch. Even if it were somehow possible for all of our senses to be numb, it would be impossible for us to be able to perceive phenomena in any kind of realistic way. Communication would be impossible. It would be impossible for us to understand phenomena to any degree. That is to say, if we had no ability to touch or to feel, to smell, to taste, to hear, or to see, it would be impossible for us to compute our external environment, because the means for that computation to take place occurs within the five senses. And even if someone were to say to you, think of an orange, even if you didn't have that orange right in front of you, you would know what an orange is like. And the reason why you would know what an orange is like is because you have sampled an orange, you have seen an orange, you have experienced an orange, and you have computed it somewhere. You have it stored in your memory banks. So that even now, if I were to say, imagine sucking on a lemon, each of us would increase our salivation. Aren't you doing that right now, if you think about sucking a lemon? And I'm doing that. And the only reason why that happens is because we've experienced lemon before. So these five senses are very important, but we often experience through the five senses without really understanding how they come about, what they're based on, how it is that this experience actually takes place, and what the meaning of all of this is. Actually, according to the Buddha's teaching, the five senses are considered to be extensions of one's own ego. That is to say, that there is an underlying foundational belief in self-nature as being inherently real and solid, the ego self. And there is an underlying foundational belief that comes with that happens automatically, in that once one assumes self, one must assume all phenomena to be relative to self. A thing is either self or it is not, you see. So one experiences phenomena as other than self. And so on a very basic level, on a very primal level, we experience what we conceive of as self and what we conceive of as other. And that is the beginning or the root of the dualistic mind and dualistic perception that we are involved in now. The entire menu of experience that is based on the five senses is based on that duality. Absolutely, there is no sense that we have, no experience that we have, and also no computation based on that experience, no conjecture that comes from the history of that experience. There is nothing that we experience that is not experienced as within that realm of duality, based on the belief based on the five senses, based on the belief in self-nature and in other as being solid and substantial and real. In fact, the five senses are part of a process of constantly building establishing and reestablishing a continuum or an artificial structure based on the belief in self-nature as being inherently real. In this way, if one were to assume self to be inherently real for one moment and then not continue that process, that assumption would be meaningless. Because in the next moment, when that moment is past, if one did not continue that assumption, it would simply go the way that thoughts go. And that process looks very similar to a bubble rising to the surface of a pond and naturally dissipating. One has to put an effort, you see, into continuing the continuum of self. It is actually an effortful process. However, we do not realize that we are doing that. We do not make a conscious decision to say, I will continue to believe in self-nature as being inherently real. We do not make a conscious and aware decision and say, ego must continue. If we could do that, then upon hearing the Buddha's teaching that tells us that desire associated with the belief in ego and ego itself are actually a cause of suffering, upon hearing that teaching, we would be able to stop that continuum, to stop that event. Those of you that have some experience in meditation, or who have simply heard the teaching and tried not to think about the ego so much, tried to make the ego smaller and less important, these different kinds of ideas that we have to advance spiritually, those of you that have tried those things know how very difficult it is, and know that the moment you think you can stop thinking about the ego, it comes up to remind you by slapping you square in the head that absolutely it is still there to be reckoned with. And that ego continues to function, and it seems to be a very automatic thing. And because of its automatic appearance, we assume ego to be true. In fact, ego continues as it does due to something that is very much like a compulsion. And it is because of the very process of conceptualizing ego itself. That very process actually gives birth to what comes after. In that, once self is assumed, by the nature of that assumption, by the method of that assumption, it must be continued, or the result will be an experience of chaos. Once one assumes that self is real, one must either continue self or one must allow it to die. And it is that allowing it to die, allowing it not to continue, that causes within us fear and causes us to give birth to ego clinging and all of the resultant desire that comes from that. Therefore, we must constantly remind ourselves of the reality of self. That continuum must be continued. We must continually reaffirm and create this structure, because like any building, if the structure is not continually fortified and strengthened, it will crumble. And since we believe in self, and since we have had the idea of self, or have assumed rather, self-nature to be inherently real, due to that, the alternative is a fearful and chaotic thing, and it is like death. It is like not surviving. And that is not something that we feel comfortable doing. All of this, however, happens on a completely automatic level, and has happened over aeons and aeons of time, through many lifetimes. Not only in this lifetime, we have popular theories on personality in this lifetime, thinking that we begin to store up information from the time of birth, and some people say even before, and that somewhere around the ripe old age of 3 we develop a personality. Interestingly, right around the time that we develop sinuses. I don't know what that means, but Having developed both sinuses and personality, we think that the ego is merely a product of all of the abuse that we have suffered as children, and therefore we can freely blame our mothers, and there's no problem with that. Actually, in fact, we have lived so many times, and our experience as sentient beings is so extensive that the very experiences that we had even up until the time that we are 3, even upon developing sinuses and personality, these very experiences are actually based on karma that we have incurred before this lifetime, previous to this lifetime. It is based on cause and effect relationships that began a very long time ago and continue to arise as interdependent, coexisting cause and effect relationships. A tapestry of experience. So there's never a time that we can remember at which we honestly said, let's go with this thing. Let's go with this ego. Let's do it. Let's taste a little desire. Let's have some of this stuff. In fact, we feel somewhat victimized, not understanding that this compulsion to build an ego, this structure, this continuum that must be effortfully continued, is a very old habitual tendency that we have carried over from a long time ago and that we continue to build. And that according to the Buddha, this is the cause of suffering. It is the desire that we experience due to this that causes us to suffer. This desire is never to be satisfied, never fully. One can never fully be satisfied, even if one is temporarily satisfied, even if one manages to develop a technique for happiness. All experiences, both happy and sad, are always impermanent. And if one does not know the method to attain enlightenment, one is actually not engaging in a practice that brings permanent happiness at any rate. One is engaged simply in phenomena. We then find ourselves revolving in cyclic existence and experiencing suffering, according to the Buddha. We experience cyclic existence as sentient beings. In this relative view, in this ordinary understanding that we have of cyclic existence, which is based on the belief in self-nature as being inherently real. It is as though the entire mandala of our experience were based on a central theme. In a sense, the center of the mandala of our activity is the ego. Not so when we become enlightened. Not so even when we practice. Because if we practice correctly, perhaps if we practice generation stage practice, or if we practice completion stage practice, whatever our particular practice has to do with, one bases that practice on the assumption of enlightenment or the assumption of the potential of enlightenment. But in our ordinary existence, in our ordinary activity, the activity that we engage in that is perhaps separate from our practice, the center of the mandala of our activity seems to be the ego. All that we experience is based on the ego. All of the perception of the five senses is based on the ego. I have cold water here. How do I know that? Because this cold is colder than my own body. This cold is relative to self, and that's how I know that it's cold. It has a certain feeling. I call that feeling wet. How do I know that? Because it's wetter than the dry feeling of my own skin. It's relative to self, and that's how I can compute it. The glass is small. How do I know that? Because it's smaller than my body. My body is much larger than that. And our computations become very elaborate from that point. One glass is bigger than another glass. And some things are wetter than other things. And there are varying degrees of temperature and different kinds of colors and different kinds of compiled experience that we can witness. But if traced back to its original inception, that experience is understood as something that is perceived relative to self. That is always the case. All experience is perceived relative to self. And according to the Buddha, and this is the point that I'm leading up to, the most important point is that according to the Buddha, we react to every single experience, both internal and external, with hope and fear, attraction and repulsion. You don't have to believe me. You can test it for yourself. It absolutely is the truth. Test yourself. You're absolutely welcome to do that. The Buddha says that you should not have faith in something that doesn't seem realistic to you, that doesn't seem real to you. And you should test it, therefore, for yourself. You can try a little test like walking into a room and walk into the room with your eyes closed. Try to find a very plain room, if you can, with nothing in it, and have one person be standing in that room waiting for you. So try to walk into that room with your eyes closed, and then open your eyes and watch your mind. You will immediately begin to look at that person, but you will look at that person in a way in which you will notice not the whole person, but little things about the person, and you will compute them very quickly, because the mind does like that. It cannot take in a whole object of that size. It must compute in rapid fire progression very quickly many different little things, and then pull that computation together into a concept. That's the way the mind has to act. It's its nature. So watch the nature of your mind. You will see many things about that person. You may see that this person is wearing a lovely sari. You may see that this person has their hair in a certain way. You may notice the color. You may notice the mannerisms. You may notice the feeling that you have from that person. You will have many, many different experiences, and you will compute them very quickly so that they seem to be happening all at once. But each and every one of them will cause you to act instantaneously, before you can even think about it, with attraction or repulsion, or neutrality, which is a combination of both. In fact, if neutrality is viewed, it is a combination of both. And that experience causes us to react in a certain way. There are certain computations that we do after that point, or exaggerations that occur after that direct experience. Because then, after reacting with attraction and repulsion, we begin to react with hope and fear. The hopes and fears that we carry around as human beings. Maybe this person will like me. Maybe this person won't. Maybe this person will be close to me and will have some intimacy. Maybe this person will leave me alone. And interestingly, both sides of this swing, each of them have hope and fear. We hope that the person will be close to us. We are afraid that the person will be close to us. We hope that the person will move away from us. We are afraid that the person will move away from us. And of course, we're civilized now. We've had many such experiences, so we've built up a lot of calluses. We don't even think that we feel this way anymore. But we continually feel this way, and this is the continual experience that we have. When we look at food, our natural tendency is to look at food and think, yum, or bleh. We don't know how to look at food without thinking what it's like for us. And that, what it's like for us, is kind of like a having. You know, we think of having, that's the only importance that food has to us. When we think of flower, we think of flower pleasing us. We think of color pleasing us. And we have lots of associations with flowers. The happy experiences that we've had when we have experienced flowers, maybe running around in a field somewhere, or the unhappy experiences we've had. Maybe we saw flowers at a funeral. Yeah, that's disgusting. Or maybe we had a terrible experience where we were really, really sick and somebody sent us flowers to get well with, and that really reminds us of being in the hospital or something. Or maybe we have an experience of being very much in love and having someone bring us flowers on a regular basis, and it made us very happy. And these experiences we have, and they are part of what makes us who we are. They remain with us, and they become part of the structure that we continually continue. According to the Buddha, however, this process of seeing all objects as being extensions of self, as being relative to self, this process of reacting to everything with attraction, repulsion, or neutrality, this process of seeing everything in terms of hopefulness and fearfulness, these are all components of the one common denominator that you find in all experience that all sentient beings have. And that experience is desire. All sentient beings have it in common. You should not think that animals do not have that experience, because they do. Certainly humans do, and we know that. We should not think that any of the 6 realms of cyclic existence, form or formless, are separate from that experience, because any concept of self, and that is what a sentient feeling being has as its basis, any concept of self has with it desire. According to the Buddha, it is that very desire that causes us to suffer. It is the building block of suffering. It is the stuff that suffering is made of. You know, we think that we grew up and our parents told us, well, we should have a Mercedes-Benz and we should have a color TV. In fact, we should have one in every bedroom and then one in the living room and the den also. And we should have 2 cars in every garage, more if we have teenage sons. I have 2, so I'm thinking about this a lot. We should have all of these different fancy things, and these things will make us happy. And we are taught that this is the stuff that dreams are made of. That's exactly the opposite of what Lord Buddha taught. Lord Buddha taught us that this is the stuff that suffering was made of. So, unfortunately, Lord Buddha disagrees with Mom, and we have to think about that. In fact, according to the Buddha, it isn't the stuff itself that causes the suffering. The stuff is neutral. What is it? It's nothing. It's a color TV. You can do lots of stuff with a color TV. You can give it to poor people. You can empty it out and use it as a planter. Yeah? You can paint it and make it a work of art. I don't know that you can eat it, but I imagine someone could. There are lots of different things. You could recycle it and you can make it something that heals people. There are lots of different things that you could do with a color TV. It's not the TV itself that's harmful. It's not the TV itself that causes suffering. What causes us suffering is the desire that we experience. Because the TV is simply an object and it never really brings happiness. Because the TV is impermanent and it can never really bring the cessation of suffering on a permanent level. Because the TV is insufficient. It does not have as its truth that which brings about the end of suffering. It cannot liberate minds. It cannot bring blessing and empowerment. It cannot do anything that really brings happiness. Now, I have a color TV. In fact, I have more than one. I have a big one. I have 2 big ones. But we have to think about how we view desire, how we view objects, in order to understand better how to experience this precious liberation that is the goal. We must find a way somehow, through the intensity of our practice, through our devotion, we must find a way to experience phenomena in a pure way, a way that is separate from the constant desire and ego cherishing, a way that is separate from the constant craving and compulsion to define ego as a rigid and solid, separate entity. We must find a way to perceive phenomena in its essence, in its nature, without desire, in a pure way, an innocent view, a view that is pristine in its nature, pure cognition, that is to say, cognition of the natural state, cognition of true nature, as opposed to computation based on the belief in self as being solid and the belief in phenomena as being separate from self. And that is why the practice of offering is brought into play, so that we can begin the process of perceiving purely. We, as well as all phenomena, near and far, all that is, everything that appears to exist, and especially we should think of ourselves in this category, are in our nature the Buddha essence, are in our nature the primordial wisdom state. We are in our nature that pure, pristine luminosity, which is free of all contrivance and all artificial construction. That is our nature. And everything that you see, even this water that I thirstily drink, thinking that it's going to help me, even this water that I understand relative to me, even this flower that I like to smell, all of these things that I see are the same and inseparable from my own nature, indistinguishable from emptiness, inseparable from pure view. The same as the Buddha nature. There is no fault in any experience or any object or any bit of external phenomena. There is no fault in any person when one understands that that object, that bit of phenomena, that person is inseparable from the nature. What is at fault is our ego clinging. What is at fault is our selfish view. When we look at everything and see it as having importance only relative to us. How many times have we walked outside and said, "It's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful day for me," is what we're thinking. I love beautiful days. I'm a terrific person because I love beautiful days. Watch me walk in this beautiful day. Can we experience that moment instead in its pristine nature, offering all of the experience at that time that we are capable of having, all of the experiences of the five senses, and even all of the conclusions and exaggerations that we might draw from the five senses, offering the mandala of that pure view to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. What a different experience. What's different about it is that it leads us closer to enlightenment. It actually leads us to be awake in the way the Buddha is awake. Because the Buddha is constantly mindful and constantly cognizant of that pure view. The Buddha is awake to that. We are busy grabbing things. We are busy understanding everything according to the ego. And that's how we compute everything. And it only brings us unhappiness. Whereas with the Buddha, it has brought him the end of suffering. Offering is extremely important because it gives us the opportunity to practice in that way. And you should think when you offer a bag of fruit to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, or give some flowers to your teacher or something like that, you should think that not to do this in a superficial way. This is a very precious opportunity. You should not think, I'm going to give this teacher some flowers. What is that? That's what you always do. That's the same as what we always do. It's all about me, isn't it? I'm going to give this teacher some flowers. She'll notice that I've given her some flowers. Or I'm going to give my teacher some fruit. And she'll notice that I'm giving her that fruit. Or she'll like that. That's not enough. We have to understand offering in a much more profound way than that. When we give fruits and flowers and things like that, for instance, to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, do we think that they need that? If I were to take this right now and offer it to Lord Buddha himself, which I do I think he needs that? Do I think he is so bereft of happy experience that he must have my daisies? Do I think that he requires this? Do I think that his happiness is so small that my daisies will make him happier? Do I think like that? Hope not. Because if I think like that, have I ever got it wrong? Instead, we should think like this. We should think that the Buddha is complete in every conceivable way, that there is nothing lacking, that the Buddha experiences the cessation of suffering, that the Buddha experiences pure bliss, that the Buddha experiences the uncontrived primordial wisdom view, limitless, pristine, luminous. What more can the Buddha have? There is no having or not having in the Buddha's mind. It isn't like that at all. But I am a sentient being, and in relative existence, the real offering, when we offer the Buddha fruit or flowers, is the offering of our tenaciousness. It is the offering of our tendency to hold on to that experience of fruit and flowers for ourselves. It is the offering of the desire to taste that fruit. It is the offering of the desire to smell that flower. It is the offering. The bottom line is that it's the offering of a pure life. And to whom are we really offering? We are offering that offering to our nature, which is the same as the Buddha, which is ultimately the same. We are offering that limited, egocentric, compulsive, artificial experience filled with desire and polluted by desire. We are offering that entire experience to the Buddha, which is the same as our own nature, and from that experience we come closer to perceiving our true nature. In conclusion, what causes us not to perceive our true nature? Are we bad? Are we stupid? Are we diseased? Is there some real block? Is there like really a wall there? According to the Buddha's teaching, that nature which is the precious awakening cannot be any closer than it is now. It is not possible for it to be closer. And yet we have never tasted it. It cannot be bigger or more available than it is now. And yet we do not know it. And the only thing that prevents it, that prevents us from awakening to the primordial wisdom state, is the compulsive, continual ego clinging, the distorted view caused by desire that we experience constantly, the constant fixation on self. It is this that causes us not to know our nature and nothing else. There's no other block. There isn't any wall. There is no distance that one must go. That nature is not separate, is not somewhere else. In Buddhist terminology, it is said that when we die, we pray that we will be reborn in Dewa Chen. Where is Dewa Chen? Is it someplace else? Is it far away? Do you really have to go west? That's what the legend says, the teaching says. Maybe I don't know. Maybe in one way you really have to go west, but I know that the real meaning, the absolute meaning, the deepest meaning, the meaning that we should hold in our hearts as being most precious, is that to be reborn in Dewa Chen really means to be reborn from ignorance into enlightenment. And that is the true meaning. And it's not very far away at all. There is no distance. Therefore, we must find a way to pacify this compulsive clinging to ego, this compulsive clinging to selfishness, this compulsive desire that we experience, since we find now that it is making us unhappy. And a most excellent practice by which to accomplish that is offering. Unselfish offering. Offering that is free of any kind of clinging. We should practice in this way. When we offer a bowl of fruit or a flower or any kind of food or any kind of money offering or anything that we offer, we should visualize that this offering, according to the blessing of Lord Buddha himself, becomes multiplied to an infinite degree. That through the blessing, through the power of our devotion, that it becomes absolutely purified. And we can visualize wind, fire, and rain purifying the offerings perfectly. That the offerings become perfectly purified, that they are multiplied and amplified until they fill all of space. That the offerings are absolutely the same as and consistent with our own experience, and that all experience that we have, every morsel of experience, is transformed in that way. And we therefore even transform all of the five senses into the five primordial wisdoms. And it is considered that all experience of every kind, both internal and external experience, therefore is offered to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, is offered at the altar of enlightenment. Thereby, our experience is the experience, then, of the precious awakening. An experience consistent with our own nature, not occluded by desire, not blocked by ego clinging. Every time we offer flowers or fruit, we should think that we are offering all of the information gathered by the five senses, every bit, so that that information is not constantly tainted with desire. And the five senses therefore become the five celestial dakinis, the five wisdoms. The 5 senses then become 5 precious activities that lead to enlightenment. So when we give our offering during sadhana practice, or when we give some offering on this day, for instance, or any day of the year that we wish to make an offering, we must consider it a practice, not just an accumulation of meritorious activity. Maybe we'll get something for it later. We shouldn't think like that. What is that? That's what we always do, and it's always made us unhappy. It should be a practice of transforming suffering into joy. A practice of transforming ego clinging into supreme generosity, also known as you. A practice of transforming desire into happiness. And so that is a brief teaching on the practice of offering. I hope it will serve to those of you that come here either infrequently or have not been here before. I hope it will serve as a means by which you might understand the many offerings of food and different kinds of things that you see on the altars. And also you should know that whenever one makes such an offering, one should dedicate the merit and the blessing and the value of that offering to the liberation and salvation of all sentient beings, because there are many sentient beings now that suffer from hunger and thirst, and they suffer in many different ways. And it isn't because they don't have that bowl of fruit that they are suffering from hunger. That's the symptom, you see. They actually suffer from hunger because they have within their mind streams the unfortunate karma of having not understood generosity in their past. And so now we have the wonderfully unbelievable opportunity to act in a supremely generous way, offering everything of our own 5 senses, and we dedicate the merit of that for their sake. Hoping and knowing that according to the Buddha's teaching, it will bring about the cessation of their suffering as well. And so that is our practice today.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We're always so happy to be showing these teachings and glad for the company to watch them. Hope you get something out of them as well. The teachings by Jetsama are shown twice a week, Wednesdays at 7:30 and Sundays at 11 a.m. Since they're pre-recorded, they're also available on YouTube anytime you want. So you can go and check them out there at KPC, youtube.com/KPC. In addition, we have meditations on Saturdays and Sundays at 10 a.m. We have the Medicine Buddha practice, which is a short, very condensed 15 or 20-minute practice that is done on Facebook Live. And it's easy to do. It gives you company that you can do it with, and it is a place that you can put in names and make prayers for people that you feel very strongly to connect to in that way. That's every evening at 7 p.m. on Facebook. And in addition, we have practices every day, a food offering ceremony. Mondays through Fridays, it's at 5:30 p.m. Right now, Tuesdays is at 4, so it's Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at 5, and Tuesday at 4. Saturdays at noon and Sundays at 2. you can double check all of that by going to tara.org and looking at the calendar. There's a link for that calendar under Maryland Events Calendar in the chat. You can go there, check it out, and by clicking on the event, you can see what time it is, where it is, how you get to it, what venue it's being shown on, etc., etc. And just about everything you need. And if it's a practice, she will also have a link to the practice so you can join in. We really want you to be comfortable and be a part of everything that we do here. So that's also available to you. Let's see. We do have some longer practices on the two main, on the special days. There are two main ones every month. One is Guru Rinpoche Day on the lunar 10th day, and that is this coming Thursday, as in tomorrow, November 3rd. So our practice will be, our Suk will be at 7:30 that day. And then there's another one coming up on Labab Duchen, which is on November 15th. That's a Tuesday. And the next Yumka, which is Dakini Day, is on November 18th. So that's a Friday. And those are longer practices. They are at 7:30. Riggs and Dupa, we do on Guru Rinpoche Day and the Duchen days, which we call 10 million days. And it's a beautiful practice to Guru Rinpoche and to the whole assembly of Vidyadharas and Buddhas. It's like going to a gigantic enlightened party. So, and making offerings to all of them so you can practice everything she taught here today. I invite you to join us at any of those. Again, join us at the calendar. Let me see. Also, if you'd like to make an offering to Jetsima, you can do so on her PayPal account, which is jetsimagift@gmail.com. And we invite you to come anytime. Our outdoors are open from dawn to dusk every day. We invite you to come and walk the land and see the statues and see everything there. And, just enjoy the outdoors. We're currently closed on the inside, and we don't know when that will change, but, we're all hoping for soon. But it will depend on, how safe it is for everyone, because we want you all to be healthy and happy. So anyway, come join us. Come be part of the temple, and we're glad to see you online. Have a great week. Stay safe. Oh, and also you can send all your prayers to, on that same tara.org. You can click on prayer requests. It's in the top menu. So we invite you to do that for anybody that needs them. And thank you. I'm done now. Have a good week and see you soon.